Welcome to Anana's creation. Tonight, we journey beyond the veil of your reality into a place that exists outside of time yet touches every moment of your life. We are here to tell the story of the three sisters, the weavers of destiny, the entities known simply as the Fates. In the vast, gray emptiness between worlds, there is a room. It is not a room you could measure with a tape or paint with a brush. It is a nexus, a workshop where the very fabric of reality is woven. The air here doesn't smell of dust, but of potential, of beginnings and endings, of static electricity just before a strike. In the center of this infinite space sits the loom. It is colossal, its frame carved from the bones of forgotten gods, its gears turning with the silent precision of the universe. And tending this loom are the three sisters. They are not always old nor always young. They are whatever the moment requires. The first is Clotho, the spinner. In this moment, she appears restless, vibrant, almost youthful. Her eyes are the color of a dawn sky, bright with the thrill of creation. Her fingers are nimble, stained not with ink, but with the raw energy of nascent life. She hums a low, energetic tune as she pulls the raw material of existence from a swirling, nebulous cloud. This material is finer than silk, stronger than steel. It is the stuff of souls. "He's next," Clotho says, her voice like the first note of a song. She doesn't need to look at her sisters. They already know. The second sister, Lachesis, looks up from her work. The measurer. Lachesis is the picture of focus. Clotho is the spark, Lachesis is the current. She holds the spool upon which the thread of life is wound. Her gaze is steady, calculating. She is the architect, the planner. While Clotho creates the thread, Lachesis decides its quality, its color, its thickness, and most importantly, its path. She holds the blueprints of causality. She nods once, sharply. "Mark Jefferson, Chicago, Illinois. Begin the spin, sister." "His time is now." Clotho grins. Her fingers fly. She twists the ethereal fibers, and a single shimmering thread leaps into existence. Glows with a faint, hopeful blue. "Oh, this one's bright," Clotho whispers, feeding the thread toward the great loom. "He has ambition. I can feel it. He wants to build things that scrape the sky." Lachesis pulls the new thread taut, her sharp eyes scanning its length. "Ambition is easy, Clotho. It is endurance that gives a life meaning." Her hands move over the thread, a practiced, almost mathematical motion. As she touches it, the thread's color shifts subtly. A streak of dark gray appears, doubt. Then a pulse of bright, solid gold. A moment of unexpected kindness he will show a stranger in 5 years. "He will struggle," Lachesis murmurs, tracing the gray flaw. "His father's shadow is long. He will question his path at 24. He will face a significant failure at 31, a project collapse that will nearly break him." "But will he break?" Clotho asks, still spinning, feeding more life, more potential into the line. Lachesis allows herself a small, thin smile. "That is not entirely up to us. But I will allot him resilience." She plucks a separate, tougher fiber from the air, a dark, unglamorous strand of sheer stubbornness, and weaves it deftly into Mark Jefferson's timeline. The blue thread flickers, absorbs it, and shines just a little steadier. And then there is the third sister. The one who never speaks. The one who never needs to. Atropos. The inflexible. The ender. She sits slightly apart from the loom, perfectly still. She could be mistaken for a statue, draped in shadows. Her face is unreadable, her age impossible to guess. She is neither young nor old, she is simply final. In her lap, resting on the dark fabric of her dress, are the shears. They are not grand or ornate. They are simple iron worn smooth by uncountable ages of use. They are the most powerful objects in the cosmos, for they sever connection. They finalize the design. Clotho spins. Lachesis measures and weaves. But Atropos, she waits. Her gaze is fixed on the loom. She watches the thread of Mark Jefferson of Chicago as it is spooled. She watches the blue of his potential, the gray of his doubt, and the gold of his kindness. She watches the complex knots of relationships Lachesis begins to tie, a difficult bond with a brother, a fleeting romance in college, the deep, complex love he will one day find with a woman named Sarah. Clotho and Lachesis design the life. Atropos decides when the design is complete. Mark Jefferson, at this very moment, is taking his first breath in a sterile Chicago hospital room. He cries, and the sound is a raw, physical echo of the thread Clotho just spun. His mother, exhausted, reaches for him. His father, a tall man whose own thread is a complicated pattern of pride and fear, watches from the doorway. None of them know that in a place beyond space, 3 sisters have just added his name to their ledger. "He's a strong one," Clotho says, satisfied, as the thread finds its rhythm on the spool. "He is adequate," Lachesis counters, already looking at the next file. His path is set. Now the next. A girl in Dallas. She will be a painter. Clotho moves to the cloud of souls, ready to spin again. The great loom of destiny turns, pulling thousands, millions, billions of threads into its mechanism. The threads of Mark and Sarah, of the doctor who delivered him, of the stranger he will help in 5 years, all turning, twisting, and knotting, creating the impossibly complex tapestry of human existence. Only Atropos does not move. Her dark eyes remain fixed on the spool holding the freshly spun, bright blue thread of Mark Jefferson. Her hand rests, pale and patient, on the cold iron of her shears. She doesn't need to look at the plan. She doesn't need to measure the allotment. She just knows. She knows the exact moment, decades from now, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, when her duty will call. She knows the sound the thread will make when it is cut. And so she waits. The loom turns. And the life of Mark Jefferson, now bound to the wheel of fate, begins. The great loom of destiny does not pause, does not sleep. It is the engine of causality, and its rhythm is the heartbeat of the universe. Clotho, the spinner, continues her endless work, pulling new souls from the ethereal mist, her fingers a blur of creation. Atropos, the ender, remains in her silent vigil, her shears resting, patient and absolute. But today our focus is on the middle sister, Lachesis, the allotment. She stands before the center of the loom, where the threads are thickest, where the tapestry is most complex. She is not looking at a new thread, but at one that has been weaving for 28 years. The thread is a vibrant, complex green, the color of new leaves and deep jade. It belongs to a woman named Emily Hayes of Austin, Texas. Emily's thread is approaching a knot. Not a tangle, but a divergence. A critical junction point that Lachesis herself measured and placed into the thread years ago. "It's straining," Clotho murmurs, pausing her spinning for a rare moment. She points to the green thread, which is vibrating rapidly, fraying at the edges as it pulls in 2 different directions. "She is in distress, sister. The tension is too high." Lachesis doesn't look away from the thread. The tension is as it was allotted. It is the pressure of a significant choice. It must be high. In Austin, Texas, Emily Hayes stands in her kitchen. The morning sun streams in, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. On the counter sits her portfolio and a plane ticket. In her hand is her phone, buzzing with a text from her dream job, a design firm in New York City. Final interview, 3 p.m. Don't be late. From the next room, a small, weak cough. Emily's thread vibrates violently on the loom. One pull is a brilliant, shimmering gold, the future she has worked for, the career, the city, the validation. The other pull is a soft, steady silver, the thread of duty, connecting her to her mother, who is recovering from a sudden, serious illness. "She can't handle both," Clotho insists, stepping closer to Lachesis. "Look. The golden thread of opportunity you allotted her is magnificent. But the silver cord of duty is strong. You've made them equal, Lachesis. She will tear herself apart." "I did not make them equal," Lachesis says, her voice calm and level like a surgeon's. "I made them balanced. Choice is the point, Clotho, not the outcome. The allotment is not the path. It is the material she has to build the path." Lachesis reaches out, her fingers hovering just above the straining green thread. She doesn't touch it. She cannot. Free will is the one mechanism in the loom that the fates themselves must honor. They can apply pressure, allot fortune, measure misfortune, but they cannot force the hand. "She feels trapped," Clotho whispers. "That is not fair." "Fairness," Lachesis replies, "is a human concept. We deal in balance. Look closer." She points. The golden thread, the New York job, is bright, but it's also thin. Promises speed and recognition, but it is hollow at its core. The silver thread, the duty to her mother, looks duller, but it is thick, woven with strands of patience and resilience. She needs the resilience, Clotho, Lachesis says softly. She doesn't know it yet, but her greatest trial is not this choice. It is coming in 3 years. The career in New York will not prepare her for it. This. She taps the silver thread. This will. Emily closes her eyes. She sees the New York skyline. She smells the exhaust and the ambition. Then she hears the cough again, followed by the soft sound of a glass tipping over. Her eyes snap open. Tension is gone. She takes a deep breath, lets it out, and picks up her phone. Her fingers type a message, her heart aching with the loss of one future, but settling with the certainty of another. I am so sorry. I have a family emergency. I will not be able to make the interview. In the nexus, the great loom shifts. The brilliant golden thread, the path not taken, dims. It doesn't vanish, but it recedes, woven back into the tapestry as a faint, shimmering what if. The silver thread, however, pulses with a new, bright light. Merges with Emily's main green thread, strengthening it, reinforcing it, repairing the frayed edges. Her line is now thicker, more durable. Clotho watches, puzzled. But she lost the opportunity. You measured that grand future for her, and now it's gone. Is it? Lachesis turns, picking up her next spool. Or did she just trade an allotment of prestige for an allotment of character? The gold was a test. The silver was the reward. She will not be a famous designer in New York this year, but she will be strong enough to survive what is coming. And the strength she just forged will allow her to build her own company in 5 years. A future she spins, not one I handed to her. Lachesis moves down the line. She has measured. Choice has been made. The balance is kept. Far in the shadows, Atropos watches the strengthened green thread settle into its new rhythm. She gives a single, almost imperceptible nod. Cut is not yet due. Lachesis is already focused on the next junction. It is a messy, chaotic thread dyed a dark, angry red. Now this one, Lachesis says, her voice devoid of judgment. David Chin, Los Angeles. He believes he is the sole master of his fate. He has been blessed with an allotment of extraordinary luck and an abundance of charm. Clotho looks at the thread and frowns. It's all charm. There is no substance, Lachesis. It is all surface. Yes, Lachesis agrees, holding up a small, heavy, leaden weight. His allotment of luck has just run out. It is time to measure the consequences. She attaches the weight to David Chen's rapidly moving thread. The loom groans as the tension snaps tight, and somewhere in Los Angeles, a man who has never known failure just made a mistake that will cost him everything. David Chen's life was a golden arrow, shot from a bow of impossible luck, guaranteed to hit a bullseye he never even aimed for. In his Los Angeles penthouse, overlooking a city of hopefuls, David considered himself the ultimate self-made man. He was the king of venture capital, a man whose charisma could secure a billion-dollar deal on the back of a napkin. He was handsome, fast, and above all, lucky. His thread, a flashy, superficial red, zipped through the loom of destiny faster than any other, dazzling and bright. He never saw the hands that spun it. He never felt the measurements that Lachesis had allotted him. He mistook the gift of fortune for the result of his own genius. Today, he was closing the biggest deal of his career, the acquisition of a green energy startup. He had charmed the board, dazzled the engineers. All that was left was the final signature from the company's stoic, old-money founder. A formality. In the nexus, Lachesis the Allator held the small, leaden weight. His allotment of unearned luck is depleted, she stated, her voice flat. It is time for the balancing. Clotho watched, her expression anxious. But he's moving so fast, Lachesis. A weight like that, it will snap his thread entirely. It will do what is required, Lachesis said. She dropped the weight. It did not fall. It simply appeared, fused to the red thread on the loom. The thread, which had been flying high and fast, was yanked violently downward. The entire loom shuddered from the sudden strain. In the Los Angeles boardroom, David Chin smiled, his pen hovering over the contract. So, we're all in agreement. A new era begins. The founder, a man David had dismissed as a relic, did not smile back. He slid a single piece of paper across the table. Mr. Chen, before we conclude, can you explain this discrepancy in your third quarter projections? It appears to be entirely fictional. David's smile faltered. A bead of sweat. This was new. He opened his mouth. The charm, the fast talk, the dazzling deflection he always relied on, it wasn't there. The words felt like ash. He looked at the founder, and for the first time, the man wasn't seeing the charisma. He was seeing the substance. And there was none. I'd have to consult my team, David stammered. The founder's gaze was cold. Your team, he said, is what convinced me. But you are hollow, son. He stood up. The deal is off. Back in the Nexus, David's red thread was chaos. Thrashed against the leaden weight, tangling, twisting, its bright color fading to a dull, panicked rust. He's panicking, Clotho cried. He's trying to call his contacts, spin his stories. But the weight. Lachesis, it's dragging him down. It is not the weight dragging him down, Lachesis corrected, her eyes fixed on the struggling thread. It is his lack of foundation. He built a skyscraper on a cloud. The weight is merely reality. Consequence. David Chen's fall was faster than his rise. The failed deal triggered an audit. The audit revealed years of risks that were not bold but reckless, saved only by blind luck. His partners, who had ridden his coattails, vanished. The media, which had adored his charm, now ripped him apart as a fraud. Within a week, he was ruined. He stood in his penthouse, now empty, the furniture tagged for repossession. He stared at his reflection in the dark glass. The lucky golden boy smile was gone. He was just a man. A failed man. The red thread on the loom was now thin, exhausted, and stained dark by the leaden weight of consequence. It lay limp, its frantic, zipping energy gone. Clotho looked at Lachesis, her eyes full of pity. You've destroyed him. Was that the allotment? Was it all just a game? To build him up and tear him down? No, Lachesis said. His first allotment is finished. The allotment of ease. It was a gift, and he wasted it. He never used it to build character or skill or empathy. He used it only to acquire more. She gestured to the limp thread. Look now. His true allotment begins. Lachesis reached into the raw materials, past the bright silvers and golds, and pulled out a single ugly fiber. It was the color of iron. It was coarse, heavy, and incredibly strong. It was the fiber of toil. Hard and glamorous work. She laid it next to David Chen's thread. Didn't merge. Just lay there. An offering. A choice. He is at the bottom, Lachesis explained. He can let his thread snap. Or he can pick up the fiber of work and, for the first time in his life, begin to spin for himself. He can weave his own substance. And Atropos? Clotho asked, glancing at the silent sister. Atropos had not moved. Her shears remained in her lap. Cut was not yet due. David Chen's story was not over, it was just beginning. He will fight it, Lachesis predicted, turning away. He will curse us. He will curse the world. But the weight will remain. The only way to lift it is to build a thread strong enough to carry it. The choice, as always, is his. Clotho sighed, turning her attention from the grim, dark red thread. Her eyes scanned the vast, shimmering tapestry of the loom, searching for something hopeful. She found it. She pointed to a steady, hopeful blue thread, the one belonging to Mark Jefferson, the architect from Chicago. It was older now, weaving its way through college. And near it, a second thread. A vibrant, compassionate pink. The two threads were separated by miles of tapestry, yet they seemed to be glowing, pulsing in rhythm, slowly, inevitably pulling closer together. Lachesis, Clotho whispered, a smile returning to her face. Look. These two. They are pulling toward each other. Lachesis looked. A rare, knowing expression crossed her features. Indeed. Convergence. I measured that junction long ago. Are they destined? Clotho asked. They are, Lachesis confirmed. A major intersection. He is Mark. And she is Sarah. In the infinite gray nexus, not all threads are drab. While the sisters work under the weight of cosmic balance, there are moments of pure, unadulterated beauty. Clotho, the spinner, was witnessing one now. Her attention had been captured by the two threads she had noticed earlier. The first, a steady, ambitious blue, Mark Jefferson of Chicago. The second, a vibrant, compassionate pink, Sarah Chen, a musician, coincidentally the estranged sister of the now disgraced David Chen, though their threads had not touched in years. These two threads, Mark's and Sarah's, were moving through the great tapestry on different tracks, yet they seemed to hum at the same frequency. And now they were drawing inexorably closer. "It's tonight, isn't it?" Clotho whispered, her fingers pausing their eternal spinning. "The intersection. Oh, Lachesis, look how they glow." Lachesis, the allotter, gave a single curt nod. Her gaze was analytical. "The junction is measured. The location is set. The influences are in place." "Influences?" Clotho asked. Lachesis pointed. "Destiny is not a sledgehammer, sister. It is a series of gentle nudges. I cannot force them to meet, but I can arrange the scenery." She gestured to several smaller ancillary threads that were now weaving themselves around Mark's and Sarah's main lines. A minor disappointment for Sarah. A major frustration for Mark. A persistent friend for both. In Chicago, Mark Jefferson, now 23, rubbed his eyes, staring at a blueprint on his brightly lit monitor. He was a junior architect, and he was living on ambition and caffeine. The gray streak of doubt Lachesis had woven into him at birth had manifested as a relentless perfectionism, a fear of failure inherited from his father. His phone buzzed. It was his friend, Jake. Text read, "Dude, I'm dragging you out. My cousin's band is playing. You need a break. 9 p.m. The Green Lantern. Be there." Mark sighed. "I don't have time," he muttered, typing a reply. "Can't. Drowning in work." In another part of the city, Sarah Chen tuned her cello in the cramped backstage area of a noisy bar called the Green Lantern. The minor disappointment Lachesis had allotted had arrived an hour ago. The main act had canceled, meaning the crowd was half its expected size. She felt her compassionate pink thread dim with nervousness. "What's the point?" she whispered to her friend, the band's guitarist. "The point," her friend said, "is we play. For 5 people or 500. We play." Back in the Nexus, Clotho watched Mark's thread. "He's not going." "Lachesis, he's staying home." "Your nudges failed." Lachesis's expression was unreadable. The primary nudge failed. Now the secondary allotment. The major frustration. Just as Mark Jefferson leaned in to finalize a difficult schematic, his apartment building's power grid failed. His monitor went black. The lights went out. A sudden, oppressive silence filled his apartment. He swore, slamming his fist on the desk. All his unsaved work was gone. He sat in the dark for a full minute. Defeated. Frustrated. And suddenly, completely, totally free. Picked up his phone, its screen the only light. He typed, "Fine. I'm on my way." The Green Lantern was crowded and loud. Mark hated it. He stood in the back, nursing a beer, already regretting his decision. He was wasting time. He was failing. That gray thread of doubt was pulsing, dark and cold. Then the opening act came on. The noisy crowd quieted. A woman walked onto the small stage, sat, and drew her bow across a cello. A single, low, resonant note cut through the smoky air. In the Nexus, the blue thread and the pink thread touched. It was not a knot. It was not a tangle. It was a resonance. The instant they made contact, a new light sparked between them. It was not blue and it was not pink. It was a deep, impossible shade of violet, a color of perfect harmony. Clotho gasped. "Lachesis, what did you do?" Lachesis was, for a fraction of a second, surprised. "I did nothing. I measured the intersection. This color, they are spinning this. This is new." Mark Jefferson, the man of angles and steel, stood mesmerized. He knew nothing of music, but he understood structure. And the music she was playing was not just sound, it was architecture. It was a cathedral of notes, full of logic and passion. He felt the gray streak of doubt in his soul go quiet, silenced by the resonance. When Sarah finished, the bar was silent before erupting into applause. She looked up, her face flushed with relief, her pink thread glowing brightly. Her eyes scanned the crowd and, for a reason neither of them could understand, locked onto the tall, serious-looking man in the back. Later, Mark found himself walking toward her, an illogical, unmeasured impulse. He started, his voice sounding rough. "I don't know music." But that had incredible structure. It was like architecture. Sarah, who had always felt her music was too emotional, too chaotic, looked at him and smiled. A genuine, unguarded smile. Architecture, she said. I've never heard it called that. I like it. Their hands brushed. The violet thread on the loom pulsed, sending a warm light radiating across the tapestry. Clotho was enchanted. They are perfect. A perfect match. They are balanced, Lachesis conceded, her eyes sharp. She watched the new violet thread with intense, analytical interest. But then her gaze moved further down Mark's blue timeline, years into his future. The gray streak of self-doubt was still there. It had not been erased by the violet. It was merely dormant. And as Lachesis watched, that gray fiber seemed to twist, as if recoiling from the new, healthy connection. Do not celebrate yet, Clotho, Lachesis warned, her voice low. A destiny is not a fairy tale. That which is spun at birth does not vanish so easily. She pointed to the looming shadow on Mark's thread. He has found his partner, but he has not yet faced his inheritance. And that gray thread, it will fight this new love. It will fight it with all the strength his father gave him. The tapestry of Mark Jefferson and Sarah Chen was, for a time, the most beautiful work on the loom. The deep, resonant violet that pulsed between his ambitious blue and her compassionate pink was a testament to a connection forged in destiny and confirmed by choice. Clotho, the spinner, would often find her gaze drawn to it. See, she would say to Lachesis. That is how it should be. A perfect weave. Lachesis, the allotter, merely pointed. You are celebrating the sunrise, sister. You forget the day must also have a noon and a night. The allotment of inheritance is due. What inheritance? Clotho asked, defensive of her favorite thread. The gray streak, Lachesis said simply. The shadow of his father. The doubt. The fear of failure. Love does not erase a flaw, Clotho. It merely illuminates it. As she spoke, a new, brilliant golden thread shot across the loom, aimed directly at Mark's blue line. It was an allotment of great opportunity. In Chicago, Mark Jefferson was summoned to his boss's office. He was, at 24, the firm's rising star. The senior partners saw his drive, his relentless perfectionism. They did not see the gray thread of doubt that fueled it. Mark, his boss, a formidable man named Allen, said, The city has approved the new modern art museum. It's the biggest project this firm has seen in a decade. We want you to lead the design team. Mark's heart hammered. This was it. The skyscraper he'd dreamed of. The validation he'd craved. But, Mark, Allen continued, his voice serious, this project will demand all of you. Not 99%. 100. No distractions. No excuses. It will be your entire life for the next 2 years. Can you handle that? The gray streak, which had been dormant, pulsed. It was a cold, familiar feeling. It was his father's voice, echoing from his childhood. A man is his work. Everything else is a distraction. Don't be weak. I can handle it, Mark said, his voice steady. That night, he was supposed to meet Sarah. She was performing a small, intimate concert. He was late. When he finally arrived, the concert was over. She was packing her cello. Mark, you made it, she said, her pink thread glowing with relief. I can't stay, he said, his mind still on schematics. Allen gave me the museum project. It's everything. That's incredible, she said, hugging him. But as she held him, she could feel the tension. He was rigid. Mark? Are you okay? I'm fine, he said, pulling away. I have to work. I have to get back. On a Friday night? But you promised. Sarah, you don't understand, he snapped, the gray thread flaring. This isn't a hobby. This is my life. It's the most important thing I will ever do. The words hit her. The compassionate pink of her thread wavered. The most important? In the Nexus, Clotho watched in horror. The gray streak of inheritance was no longer just a streak. It was expanding like a dark, cold oil slick, moving along the blue thread of his ambition. It was actively wrapping itself around the beautiful violet thread of his connection, chilling it, choking it. Lachesis. He's letting it win, Clotho cried. He is making a choice, Lachesis said, her voice grim. He is choosing the flaw over the balance. The next few weeks were a descent. Mark was consumed. He was not just working, he was fleeing. He fled into the cold logic of architecture, away from the complex, vulnerable emotions Sarah represented. He became critical. He became distant. He became, bite by bite, his father. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. Sarah let herself into his apartment. It was a mess of blueprints, empty coffee cups, and stale energy. He was asleep at his desk. She gently touched his shoulder. "Mark, come to bed." He jerked awake, disoriented and angry. "What are you doing? I told you I have a deadline." "You have a life," she pleaded, her pink thread trying to send warmth. This isn't you. This is an obsession. I miss you. We are falling apart." "We are falling apart," he scoffed, standing up. The gray thread was in full control. "This is what success looks like, Sarah. It's pressure. It's sacrifice. Maybe you don't get that playing your cello in coffee shops, but I do." It was a cruel, calculated blow, and as soon as he said it, he saw the light in her eyes go out. The violet thread on the loom snapped taut. It didn't break. Not yet. But it was stretched thin, all its color drained, shivering under the assault from the gray. Sarah Chen picked up her coat. Her voice was quiet, all the compassion turned to a cold, hard sadness. "You're right. I don't understand. I thought I was in love with Mark. But I'm just looking at the ghost of his father." She walked out the door. Mark stood alone, the silence of the apartment roaring in his ears. He looked at his blueprints. He had his museum. He had his work. He had his inheritance. And he was completely, utterly alone. In the Nexus, Clotho was silent, tears welling. The violet thread was a pale, barely there line. Lachesis watched, her expression one of clinical observation. The flaw has won the battle. The connection is severed. And then, for the first time since this story began, the third sister moved. Atropos, the ender, who had sat silent and still, slowly lifted her head. Her gaze, ancient and final, left the tapestry as a whole and fixed itself with chilling precision on the thin, damaged violet thread that connected Mark and Sarah. She did not reach for her shears. Not yet. But she was watching. Clotho saw the look. A new, colder fear seized her. "Lachesis, why is she watching them?" Lachesis's face was grim. "Because a destiny is not just about beginnings and middles. It is about ends. A thread that is stretched to the breaking point, a connection that is abandoned, it begins to die. And she, sister, is the one who reaps the threads that die." The silence in the Nexus was heavier than any sound. It was the silence of a held breath, of a final moment suspended. Clotho, the spinner, could not look away from the thread. The beautiful, resonant violet that had connected Mark Jefferson and Sarah Chen was now a pale, sickly gray-white. It was brittle, thin, and it vibrated with a low, painful frequency. It was the color of a fresh scar. And Atropos was watching. Her head was no longer bowed. Her ancient, unblinking eyes were fixed on the dying thread of connection. Her hand, pale and patient, rested on the cold iron of her shears. "Do something," Clotho whispered frantically to Lachesis. "Your allotment went wrong. The gray streak you gave him, the inheritance, it was too strong. You must balance it." "I did balance it," Lachesis, the allota, replied. Her voice was cold, objective. "I balanced his flaw with her compassion. I balanced his ambition with her stability. The design was sound. He chose to imbalance it. He chose the flaw. But it was destined," Clotho pleaded. "You said it was a major intersection." "An intersection is not a guarantee," Lachesis countered. "It is a presentation of a path. I measured the road, I pointed him to it, and he met her there. But he has chosen to walk off it. Free will, sister, is the one element in this loom that can override any measurement. And it has. In Chicago, Mark Jefferson was, by every metric, a success. His designs for the museum were lauded as brilliant, visionary. He was the star of the firm. His blue thread of ambition was bright and hot, and the gray streak of his father's shadow was wrapped around it like armor. He was protected from doubt, from vulnerability, and from connection. He worked. He slept at the office. He won. And in his empty apartment, the silence was absolute. He would sometimes stand in the spot where Sarah had last stood, and he would feel nothing. Just a cold, sterile emptiness. The gray thread had done its job. It had choked out the violet, and with it, the pain. He told himself it was for the best. Distractions were for the weak. In another part of the anemic, grieving white, she had stopped playing music. The joy was gone. Her compassionate pink thread was dim. She felt the loss of Mark like an amputation. How could something so real, so fated, just die? In the nexus, the pale violet thread trembled and grew colder. Slight, the light they had spun was fading. Atropos, the inflexible, saw it. The energy was gone. Potential was nullified. It was an echo. A dead thing still taking up space on the great loom. Her duty was clear. She was the editor. She was the ender of that which was final. Her hand closed around the shears. She lifted them. The iron tools, simple and terrifying, glinted in the non-light of the nexus. She moved with the slow, inevitable grace of a tide. "No," Clotho breathed. "Lachesis, she's going to cut it. It's not a life." "She can't." "She can," Lachesis said, her own voice tight. "She does not only sever the thread of life. She severs the threads of potential, of what-ifs. She reaps the connections that have been irrevocably broken. It is her duty to clean the tapestry of dead ends." The shears opened. Two dull blades positioned themselves around the frail, white thread. Atropos prepared to close her hand. But then a flicker. In his apartment, Mark was looking at an old photograph of his father, a stern, successful, unhappy man. Mark had finally achieved everything his father wanted. He was a success. He was respected. And he was completely miserable. A single rebellious thought, the first spark of his own true will, pierced the gray armor. He was wrong. The same instant across town, Sarah sat in her silent apartment. Her eyes fell on her cello, dusty in the corner. Her fingers twitched. She felt an echo of pain, but also an echo of the music. She picked up the bow. She drew it across the strings, playing one single mournful note. The first note of the piece she played the night they met. In the nexus, a microscopic pulse of light, one blue spark, one pink, shot down the deadened thread. Atropos paused. Her blades hovered, a millimeter from the thread. Connection was not dead. It was in critical condition. It was a flat line, interrupted by a single defiant heartbeat. The ender of all things looked at the thread. It was not her time. Not yet. She slowly, almost reluctantly, lowered the shears. But she did not put them down. And she did not look away. Her gaze was now a promise. A death sentence, postponed, not commuted. Clotho let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. "It's alive." "Barely," Lachesis said, her mind already working, calculating. The balance had shifted, if only by a fraction. "It is in stasis. But it is not enough. His inheritance is too strong. Her grief is too deep. They cannot find their way back to this from where they are." Her eyes scanned the vast, complex loom. He needs an external force. A shock to his system. Something to break the gray armor for good. A consequence he cannot ignore. Her gaze moved, finding a thread she had not observed in some time. A dark, tangled, rusty red line, heavy with the iron-gray weight of toil. It was the thread of David Chen. His sister's grief, Lachesis murmured, a new plan forming. And his own desperation. She looked at Clotho. The disgraced brother is about to re-enter Sarah's life. And he is going to bring chaos. The very chaos Mark Jefferson's orderly world cannot withstand. The decision was made. Lachesis, the allotter, whose gaze saw the totality of the tapestry, knew that the dormant, dying thread of connection between Mark and Sarah could not be saved by peace. It required a catalyst. It required chaos. She turned her attention to the rusty red thread of David Chen. After his fall from grace in Los Angeles, David's life had been a brutal lesson in the fiber Lachesis had allotted him. Toil. The unearned luck was gone. Charm was ineffective. He had spent the last year drifting, working cash labor jobs, his bitterness growing with every paycheck. His thread was tangled, heavy, and dark. You cannot mean to use him, Clotho said, appalled. She pointed to David's thread. It is a vortex, Lachesis. It is heavy with resentment and failure. It will not stir Sarah's thread, it will drown it. He is her brother, Lachesis stated simply. A duty thread spun at her birth still connects them. It is weak from his neglect, but it is there. And his desperation is now sufficient. Lachesis touched the thread of David Chen. It was not a grand gesture. It was a simple metaphysical push. She did not give him money or a new idea. She simply closed a door. In a diner in Omaha, Nebraska, David Chen, working as a line cook, was fired. The leaden weight of consequence was still attached, and his angry, resentful attitude had finally worn out his boss's patience. He was out. He had $40 in a duffel bag. He looked at his phone. He had one contact left in the world that he hadn't burned. His sister. 2 days later, Sarah Chen, who had just begun to touch her cello again, her grief still a heavy cloak, heard a knock on her Chicago apartment door. She opened it. The man standing there was not the Golden Boy brother she vaguely remembered. This man was thin, haggard, and his eyes were hollow, save for a spark of bitter resentment. "David," she whispered. "Hey, Sarah," he said, his voice rough. "Look, I'm in a jam. I have nowhere else to go. I just need a couch. A week. Tops." In the nexus, David's rusty red thread crashed into Sarah's pale, grieving pink line. Collision was not gentle. It was abrasive. Sarah's compassionate pink fiber, her core identity, pulsed. He was her brother. She could not turn him away. "Of course," she said, stepping aside. "Come in." Chaos was immediate. David was not a grateful guest. He was an angry one. He was a black hole of need. He slept all day, was gone all night, and filled her small, quiet apartment with the toxic energy of his failure. He saw her cello in the corner. "You still playing that thing?" he sneered one afternoon. "Thought you'd have given up that hobby by now. Didn't make you rich, did it?" "It's not about being rich, David," she said, her voice shaking. "Right," he scoffed. "It's about art. Look where art got you. This tiny apartment. You're just like me, sis. A failure." Her pink thread, which had been pale with grief, suddenly flared with a new, hot color. Bright red. Anger. "You don't get to do that," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "You don't get to come in here, a ghost, and call me a failure." "I'm a ghost?" he laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "I'm the one who's real. I'm the one who's seen the work you talk about. It's a lie, Sarah. It's all a rigged game. We're all just pretending." In the nexus, Clotho was frantic. "Lachesis, look. He's destroying her. Her thread is vibrating with stress. That fragile violet thread, it's shaking itself to pieces." "She was stagnant," Lachesis corrected, her eyes narrowed in concentration. "Now she is fighting. Her grief has been replaced by a new fire. She is remembering how to be strong. And that new, violent energy, watch." The red, angry vibration from Sarah's thread did not just stay put. It traveled. It was a shockwave. It shot through the tapestry, down the thin, pale, dormant violet line that still connected her to Mark. Miles away, in a sterile, silent boardroom, Mark Jefferson was presenting his final design for the museum. He was at the peak of his power. His bosses were nodding. His gray thread of inheritance was purring with approval. He was successful. He was orderly. He was in control. And then the shockwave hit. It was not a sound. It was a feeling. A sudden, illogical, and overwhelming spike of panic. His heart hammered. His vision blurred. He gripped the podium. It was not a fear of the presentation. It was a terrifying, visceral, and absolute certainty that Sarah was in danger. He saw her face, not angry but sad, the way she looked when she left. "Mr. Jefferson," his boss asked, "are you all right?" Mark tried to speak. The gray thread, his father's voice, screamed at him. "Focus! Do not be distracted. This is your moment." But for the first time, another voice screamed louder. It was the violet thread, jolted back to life by the shockwave of her pain. Pulled. It was a physical ache in his chest. He stammered, "I have to go." I'm sorry. He left the podium. He ran from the boardroom, ignoring the stunned, angry calls of his boss. He ran out of the building, fumbling for his phone, his hands shaking. The gray armor had cracked. In the Nexus, Lachesis watched, her face a mask of grim satisfaction. The shock has been delivered. The stasis is broken. She looked at the loom, where the blue thread and the gray thread were now fighting each other, the violet thread pulling violently at both. Now, Mark Jefferson, Lachesis murmured. Now we see which thread is stronger. The one I gave you at birth, or the one you spun for yourself. Mark Jefferson ran. He didn't wait for the elevator. He burst through the fire escape, taking the stairs 2 at a time, his expensive Italian leather shoes echoing in the concrete well. His mind was a war zone. 2 forces were battling for control of his body. The first was the gray streak of his inheritance. It was a cold, analytical voice screaming at him, "You are a fool! You just committed professional suicide. You abandoned the museum, your masterpiece, for a feeling. You are weak. You are your mother's son, not your father's." But the second force was stronger. It was the violet thread, jolted to life. It wasn't a voice. It was a physical, primal pull, an engine of panic that roared, "She's in trouble. Go. Faster. She is in danger." He hit the lobby, shoved past a bewildered security guard, and ran into the Chicago street, hailing a cab with a desperation that was new to him. In the Nexus, the tapestry was alive with frantic energy. Mark's blue thread, supercharged by the violet, was racing across the weave, heading for the collision point. "He's doing it," Clotho cheered, her hands clasped. "He's choosing her. Look at the violet thread, Lachesis. It's bright again. It's pulling him." Lachesis watched, her expression uncharacteristically intense. "It is pulling. But the gray thread is pulling back. He is running to her, yes. But he is also running from his own failure. He is in a state of pure panic. He does not yet know why he is running. He just knows he must." Her gaze shifted. Atropos, the ender, had not relaxed. Her hand was still on the shears. The thread was active, but it was still in mortal danger. In Sarah's apartment, the argument had reached its peak. "You're calling me a failure?" Sarah's voice was low, trembling with a fury she hadn't felt in years. "I may not be rich, David, but I am not a void. I am not a black hole, sucking the life out of everyone who tries to help me." "You think you're helping?" David laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "You're just hiding. You're hiding in this tiny apartment with your sad little hobby, just like I hid in my penthouses. We're the same, sis. We're the Chen family. We're cursed to fail." "Get out," she said. "What? Get out? I mean it, David. I will not let you break me." "You're kicking me out," he said, a genuine, desperate panic in his eyes. "Onto the street? Your own brother." It was at that exact moment that a frantic, pounding fist hit the door. Sarah and David both froze. Pounding came again, louder. "Sarah! Sarah, open the door. It's Mark." Sarah's anger instantly evaporated, replaced by stunned confusion. She pulled open the door. Mark Jefferson stood in the doorway. He was breathless, his tie was loose, and his eyes were wide with a terror she didn't understand. He was still in his $1,000 suit, a figure from another world. He grabbed her arms, his hands shaking. "Sarah, are you okay?" I was in a meeting and I had this feeling, a terrible feeling. I thought you were hurt. I thought." He saw her face, stained with tears. He saw the anger still lingering in her eyes. And he knew his panic was justified. "What's wrong? What happened?" Before she could answer, a figure stepped out of the shadows of her apartment. Well, David Chin sneered, his eyes raking over Mark's suit. "Look what we have here. The architect. Come to save the day." Collision was total. Mark's world of clean lines, order, and ambition, his blue and gray threads, slammed into the physical embodiment of chaos, failure, and resentment, David's rusty red thread. This was the shock Lachesis had planned. Mark's problem with his father was abstract. His failure at the museum was a consequence. This was a crisis. "So you're the guy," David said, stepping forward, enjoying the chaos. The one who broke her heart. You look like one of my old partners. All suit, no spine. The gray thread in Mark flared instantly. This was disorder. This was a threat to be managed. Who the hell are you? Mark demanded. Sarah, what is this? Sarah, caught between the man she loved and the brother she pitied, felt her pink thread shred. He's my brother, Mark. David. In the Nexus, Lachesis watched, her focus absolute. And now, the test begins. The gray thread will tell Mark to fix this, to control the chaos, to assess David as a liability and discard him. The violet thread, it will tell him to listen, to protect. Mark was drowning. The gray voice was screaming, "This is messy. This is a distraction. This is not your problem. You have your own life, your career to fix. Get out of here." He looked at David, the mirror image of failure. He looked at Sarah, her face a mask of pain and exhaustion. He saw the woman he had abandoned for his ambition. And the panic he had felt in the boardroom finally clarified. It wasn't just fear for her, it was love for her. He made his choice. He deliberately broke eye contact with David, turning his entire body to face Sarah. He ignored the agent of chaos. He looked only at her. "I don't care who he is," Mark said, his voice quiet but shaking with a new, raw intensity. "I am not leaving you. Are you okay?" The violet thread, which had been pale and thin, exploded with a sudden, brilliant, blinding light. It had won. It had beaten the gray thread, which recoiled, momentarily stunned. Mark had, for the first time, chosen connection over inheritance. But the catalyst was still there. David Chin let out a short, ugly laugh. "Oh, this is rich. The White Knight. You have no idea what you just walked into, architect." Lachesis nodded, satisfied. "The armor is broken. Choice is made. But the chaos is just getting started." The air in Sarah's apartment was static, charged with the collision of three worlds. Mark Jefferson, the man of order, stood in the doorway, a refugee from his own life. Sarah Chin stood in the middle, the epicenter of the emotional earthquake. And David Chin, the agent of chaos, leaned against the wall, a bitter smile on his face. He was the first to speak, his voice dripping with cynical amusement. "Touching. Really? Are you okay?" He mocked Mark's words. "That's beautiful, man. But it doesn't pay her rent. Which, by the way, is late, architect." Sarah flinched, mortified. "David, shut up. It's not true." David shot back. "I've been here 3 days and I've seen the letters. You're broke. You're grieving the suit here and your landlord is about to kick you out. And I'm the one who's a failure." This was the new test. Mark's gray thread, his father's voice obsessed with success, stability, and the shame of failure, flared. The old Mark would have seen this as a liability, a messy, unprofessional problem to be avoided. But the violet thread, the connection to Sarah, was still pulsing. He looked past David's taunts and saw only the deep, painful flush on Sarah's face. "Is that true?" Mark asked her, his voice quiet, ignoring her brother completely. "Are you in financial trouble?" Before she could answer, the gray world Mark had just abandoned ripped its way back into the room. His phone buzzed. A harsh, demanding vibration. He pulled it from his pocket. The screen read, "Alan. Boss." He ignored it. Buzzed again. "Alan. Boss." And again. The gray thread in his soul screamed in pure, unadulterated panic. "Your career. It's over. You're a fool. You just destroyed everything for nothing." David saw the look on his face. "Ah," he sneered. "There it is. The boss calls and the puppy flinches. The real world. See, Sarah? He'll run. It's what men like him do. He ran from you before. He's about to run again. You're a distraction." David's words were poison, perfectly crafted to strike the gray thread, to validate every fear Mark's father had ever instilled in him. Sarah looked at Mark. Her eyes were not angry. They were just waiting. She was watching to see if the ghost of his father would win. In the Nexus, Clotho held her breath. "He's going to break. The gray is too strong. The shame of his failure, the mess of her brother, it's too much. Lachesis watched, her eyes fixed on the weave. The inheritance is fighting the connection. The choice he made at the door must now become a conviction. Mark looked at the buzzing phone in his hand, the symbol of his ambition, his success, his father's approval. He looked at David, the symbol of failure and chaos. And he looked at Sarah, the symbol of home. He pressed the silence button. The buzzing stopped. He took a deep breath, and for the first time, he spoke with a voice that was not his blue ambition or his gray inheritance. It was something new. "You're right," Mark said, looking straight at David. David faltered, his sneer dropping. "What?" "You're right," Mark repeated, his voice stronger. "I did run. I ran from her because I was a coward. I was terrified. I am terrified of failing. I was becoming my father. A man who built incredible things but was empty inside." He turned to Sarah, and the violet thread blazed. "I threw this away. 'Cause I was scared. I ran from my job today because I was scared for you. I have no idea what I'm doing. Probably just lost my career. But I am not leaving. I am not running. Not from you. Not anymore." It was a confession. It was an act of total surrender, not to failure but to truth. In the nexus, a new fiber began to spin right alongside the violet. It was a clear, shining diamond white. "Lachesis," Clotho whispered, awestruck. "What is that?" "I've never seen that color." "It is substance," Lachesis said, a rare note of approval in her voice. "It is the fiber he is spinning himself. It is truth. He is finally weaving his own character. It is the only thing strong enough to repair the damage." The new, white thread of truth began to act as a suture, weaving into the pale, scarred violet thread, healing it, making it stronger than it had ever been. Sarah Chin looked at Mark, and for the first time in months, she wasn't seeing the man who left. She was seeing the man she met. Her pink thread of compassion, which had been turned to anger, softened and reached out, intertwining with his. David Chen was stunned into silence. He had expected a fight, a denial, a display of arrogance. He had no defense against raw honesty. The emotional battle was won. But the practical one had just begun. Mark's phone buzzed one last time. It was a text. From Alan. It read, "You have 1 hour to be in my office. Or you're fired." Mark read the text. He looked at Sarah, who was now looking at her disastrous, volatile brother. The immediate crisis was over, but the wreckage was all around them. Lachesis watched the loom. He has chosen his heart. Now he must face the world. The museum was not just a building. It was his entire allotment of ambition. What happens when a man walks away from his own measured destiny? The ultimatum hung in the air. "You have 1 hour to be in my office. Or you're fired." Mark read the text, his thumb hovering over the screen. Sarah saw the look on his face, the blood draining from it. "Mark, your job," she whispered. The immediate, chaotic crisis with her brother was momentarily forgotten, replaced by the crushing weight of reality. He looked at her. He saw the fear for him in her eyes. Then he looked at David, who was watching with a kind of detached, cynical curiosity, waiting to see the architect crumble. The gray thread of his inheritance screamed at him to run, to beg, to salvage the museum, the masterpiece, the only thing that mattered. The violet thread, now sutured with the white fiber of truth, simply held him steady. "I have to go," Mark said, his voice firm. He wasn't asking for permission. He was stating a fact. He slid his phone back into his pocket. "I have to face him." He turned to Sarah, and his voice softened. "But I am not going back to who I was. I don't know what's about to happen. I might be fired. But this," he gestured between the two of them, "this is real. I am not running from you again. I will be back. No matter what." Sarah searched his eyes. Panic was gone, replaced by a deep, weary certainty. She nodded. "Go. I'll be here." In the nexus, Clotho wrung her hands. "He's leaving her. He's choosing the job. He's going back to the gray." "No," Lachesis corrected, her eyes fixed on the loom. "He is not leaving her. He is facing his other allotment. The blue thread of ambition and the violet thread of connection are now in direct conflict. The loom demands a balancing. He cannot have both in the way they were originally measured. He is going to renegotiate his destiny. Mark Jefferson walked back into the pristine, silent lobby of his firm. He was a ghost. His suit was rumpled. He was covered in a cold sweat. His hair was a mess. He was not the golden boy who had left. The receptionist stared, her mouth open. As he walked toward the executive offices, the quiet clicking of keyboards stopped. Everyone was watching. He didn't care. The gray thread of shame was there, but the white thread of truth was stronger. He walked up to his boss's office. The door was open. Alan was standing by the window, his back to the room. "You're late," Alan said, his voice dangerously quiet. "I am," Mark said. Alan turned. His face was thunderous. "Do you have any idea what you did? You didn't just walk out. You ran. You humiliated me in front of the museum board. You humiliated this firm. You have single-handedly destroyed your entire career. In one single psychotic break." The gray thread in Mark screamed. "Apologize. Beg. Make an excuse. Lie." The Mark met his boss's gaze. "I apologize for the way I left. It was unprofessional. I put you in an impossible position. But it wasn't a break. It was a clarification." Alan's eyes narrowed. "A clarification? You are fired, Mark." The words hit, and Mark waited for the gray fear to swallow him. It didn't. He just felt calm. "I understand," Mark said. "Before I go, I need you to know why. I ran out because I believed the person I love was in danger. And I was right. She was. And if I had to choose right now between the museum project and her, I would choose her. I would choose her every single time. I'm sorry it cost you the contract." Mark had said his piece. He nodded and turned to leave. "Stop." Mark paused, his hand on the door. Alan stared at him, his expression unreadable. "My wife Elizabeth," he said, his voice suddenly distant. "She was sick for 3 years. Lung cancer. I was designing the symphony hall. I was here, day and night. I missed a lot. I built half this city, Mark. And I was in a meeting when she died." He looked at Mark, his eyes filled with a cold, ancient anger. "You're a brilliant architect, Jefferson. The most talented I've ever seen. But you're a terrible person. You're cold. You're driven by fear. You're just like your father." Mark flinched, the words hitting harder than "you're fired." "Or rather," Alan continued, "you were. Today, running out of that room like a madman, it was the single stupidest career move I have ever witnessed. But it was the first truly human thing I have ever seen you do." A long silence. "You're not fired," Alan said. Mark turned, stunned. "What?" "You're off the museum project. Effective immediately. You're too unstable for that kind of pressure. The board will never trust you again. You're on probation. And I'm putting you on the parking garage schematic for the new West Side Mall." A parking garage. The ultimate architectural insult. "You'll work out of the annex office. You will not present to clients. You will draw. And you will not miss a deadline," Alan said. "Now get out of my office. And for God's sake, Jefferson, go fix your life." Mark stood there for a moment, processing. He had lost his masterpiece. He had lost his status. He had lost everything his gray thread valued. And he felt light. He felt free. "Thank you," Mark said. In the Nexus, Clotho was bewildered. He's designing a parking garage? But his blue thread, his allotment of ambition, the skyscraper, it's gone. "The allotment was for ambition," Lachesis corrected. "But he has redefined it. He has prioritized connection. The loom is adjusting. He has not lost his blue thread, but he has balanced it. He has woven the violet and white threads into it. His destiny is no longer the museum. His destiny is his own." Mark walked out of the office. He had lost his dream, but he had won his soul. Now he had to go back to Sarah's apartment where her chaos was waiting. Lachesis watched his thread move back across the tapestry. He has faced his own inheritance. Now he must face hers. Mark Jefferson walked back. He didn't take a cab. He walked the 2 miles from his downtown office to Sarah's apartment. The city was loud, sirens, traffic, people shouting, but in his head it was quiet for the first time in his life. He had just been demoted. He had been taken off his masterpiece, the project that was meant to define him, and had been reassigned to a parking garage. The blue thread of his ambition, the one Clotho had spun with such vibrant hope, was dim, confused. The gray thread of his father's inheritance, the voice of shame, was whispering, but it had no power. It was hollow. But the violet thread of his connection and the new, hard-won white thread of his truth were steady. They were a warm, solid core in his chest. He had lost his status. He had lost his destiny. But he had found his footing. In the Nexus, Clotho watched this new, subdued movement. He seems broken, Lachesis. His blue thread is so dull. He lost. You let his allotment of ambition be destroyed. I let nothing, Lachesis, the allotment replied. He traded. He was offered 2 destinies, the great one I measured for him and the real one he spun for himself. He chose real. The museum was my design. The parking garage and his choice to return to her, that is his design. Her eyes narrowed. But the test is not over. He has faced his gray inheritance of fear. Now the real challenge. Can his new white thread of truth withstand her inheritance? Mark arrived at Sarah's apartment. The door was slightly ajar. He pushed it open. Chaotic anger was gone. It had been replaced by a heavy, toxic silence. Sarah was sitting on the couch, her head in her hands, her pink thread looking exhausted. David was at the small kitchen table, staring into an empty beer bottle. The rusty red of his thread was sullen, the leaden weight of his consequence casting a long shadow over the room. They both looked up as he entered. "Mark," Sarah said, her voice muffled. "You're back." What happened?" David scoffed, though his voice lacked its earlier bite. "So, did they fire you? Or did they? You look like you just got run over." Mark didn't look at Sarah. He looked directly at David. He unbuttoned his suit jacket, loosened his tie, and sat in the remaining chair, not as a savior but as a man. "They didn't fire me," he said, his voice flat. "They took me off the museum project. I'm designing a parking garage." This was not the answer David expected. His entire attack was built on the premise of Mark's success, his arrogance. David stared. A parking garage? You? The golden boy, the architect? Wow. A strange, new expression crossed his face. Not a sneer. Confusion. You really did blow it all up? For her? Yeah, Mark said simply. I did. A new silence settled. Mark had just nullified David's primary weapon, his failure. Mark turned his attention to David. Sarah told me you were in LA. She said you were successful. David's rusty red thread flared with old bitterness. I had it all. Until the luck ran out. Until the consequence Lachesis measured showed up. I know what that's like, Mark said. David looked up, sharp. You? You know nothing about what I've been through. No, Mark said. My gray thread was the fear of failure. Your red thread is the failure. We're just 2 different pictures of the same terrified man. I spent my whole life running from what you became. I built my own prison just like you did. Mine was just prettier. In the Nexus, Lachesis watched, fascinated. Look, Clotho. The white thread of Mark's truth was touching David's rusty red chaos. And David's thread was not rejecting it. It was resonating. They match, Clotho whispered. They are 2 sides of the same coin, Lachesis murmured. The inheritance Mark is facing is not just David. It is the mirror of his own greatest fear. And he is no longer afraid of it. Sarah had been watching this, her head lifting. She was seeing a new dynamic, one she didn't understand. David was silent for a long time. So what now, architect? He finally said, his voice rough. You're a parking garage guy. You're one of us. You're a failure. Mark looked at David, and for the first time, he didn't feel fear or disgust. He felt a strange, distant empathy. Maybe, Mark said. Yeah, maybe I am. But I'm not running. He turned to Sarah, and the violet thread blazed with a deep, steady warmth. And I am not leaving you to deal with this alone. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were not from grief. Mark, you don't have to, she whispered. This is my family, my mess, my inheritance. It was, Mark said. He stood up, walked over, and sat on the couch next to her. He didn't try to kiss her. He didn't try to fix her. He just sat with her. I would like it to be our mess. If you'll let me. He offered her his hand, palm up. She looked at his hand. She looked at her broken brother. She looked at the man who had just thrown away his life's dream to sit with her in the wreckage. She put her hand in his. The violet thread shone, strong and healed. David watched them, his face a mask of confusion. The white light from Mark's honesty and the pink light from Sarah's compassion were swirling around him, and his rusty red chaos didn't know how to fight. In the Nexus, Lachesis nodded. A new, fragile team had been spun. The connection is true, she said. But it is fragile. And David Chen's leaden weight of consequence is still attached to his thread. He is still, first and foremost, allotted chaos. And chaos has a tendency to break things. The grand, cinematic moment of reunion was over. Now the quiet, awkward, and messy after had begun. Mark and Sarah sat on the couch. David sat at the kitchen table, the wall of his bitterness rebuilt. The adrenaline of the confrontation had faded, leaving behind the exhaustion of 3 broken people. David, Sarah said, her voice small, her pink thread of compassion weary. You can sleep on the couch. For now. We can figure things out in the morning. David just grunted, not looking at them. His rusty red thread of chaos had retracted into a sullen, silent knot. Mark turned to Sarah, keeping his voice low. The plan. And be honest. Your landlord. David said you were late. Sarah flinched. The pink thread, which was so compassionate to others, flared with a hot, dark color when turned on herself. Shame. I'm 2 months behind, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. After you left, I lost my focus. The music, it stopped. The gigs dried up. I was trying to find a temp job when David, he just showed up. I don't have a plan, Mark. I'm just drowning. In the Nexus, Clotho watched the tangled threads. Lachesis, this is a disaster. She's in debt. He's been demoted. Her brother is a millstone. The violet connection is strong, but it's trapped. It's buried under David's red chaos and her pink shame. This isn't a connection, it's a trap. It is a burden, Lachesis corrected, her gaze sharp. He has accepted her mess. Now he must prove he can help carry it. But look, Lachesis pointed to David's thread. The leaden weight of consequence Lachesis had attached was pulsing with a dark, heavy energy. His allotment of consequence was not just failure. It was debt. And he did not just lose his own money. At that moment, there was another knock on Sarah's door. It wasn't the frantic pounding Mark had used. It was heavy, slow, deliberate. Sarah's head snapped up. The landlord? He wouldn't knock like that, David said, his voice suddenly tight with a new, familiar fear. Don't answer it. The knock came again, harder. A man's voice, deep and flat, called out. David Chen, we know you're in there. Open the door. Sarah looked at David, terrified. Who is that? David's rusty red thread was flaring with pure, unadulterated panic. He was no longer the bitter, cynical man. He was prey. Old business, he whispered. From Vegas. Mark stood up. The blue thread of order and the white thread of truth took over. He was the calm one. He went to the door and opened it. 2 large men in cheap, ill-fitting suits stood in the hallway. They did not look like landlords. David Chen, the first man asked, looking past Mark. David, seeing he was trapped, stood up. Who's asking? He stammered. We're here about the $200,000 marker you signed at the Mirage, the second man said, stepping into the room. The one you signed before you declared bankruptcy. Your luck ran out. Payment is due. Tonight. This was it. The leaden weight. It was not a metaphor. It was loan sharks. Sarah let out a small, terrified gasp. I don't have it, David said, his voice cracking. I'm broke. Look at this place. I'm sleeping on our couch. That sounds like a you problem, the first man said. He took a step toward David. The associates in Vegas don't care how you get it. They just care when. And when is now. You either pay or you come with us. This was the ultimate chaos. This was not a problem Mark could design his way out of. This was real, physical danger. In the Nexus, Clotho screamed. Lachesis, this is your allotment. The leaden weight. You've doomed them. Her eyes shot to the silent sister. Atropos. Atropos was watching. Her gaze was not on the violet thread. It was fixed with chilling intent on David's rusty red thread. His time, it seemed, was up. I allotted consequence, Lachesis said, her voice strained. I did not allot this. Choice of how he failed was his. This is the chaos he spun. The men moved toward David. Sarah cried out. No, please. He doesn't have any money. Mark had a choice. He could run. He could call the police and watch as David was arrested or worse. He could let the consequence play out. He looked at Sarah's terrified face. He looked at David, the mirror of his own failure, now about to be shattered. Wait, Mark said. The men paused. Mark pulled out his wallet. He didn't have $200,000 in cash. But he had his Amex Black Card, the last potent symbol of his old successful life. He doesn't have it, Mark said, his voice shaking but steady. But I'm his new financial architect. I'm handling his restructuring. He's worthless. But I'm not. The first man looked at the high-limit card, then at Mark. You want to take this on, kid? This isn't a parking garage. This is $200,000. You're going to pay his marker. Mark's gray thread was screaming, a high-pitched wail of terror. This is suicide. This is madness. He looked at Sarah. He took a deep breath, and his white thread of truth solidified. I am, Mark said. I'm taking his debt. Let's make a deal. In the Nexus, there was a sound. A sharp twang. Lachesis stared, her eyes wide with a shock she had never felt before. He has interfered. Clotho, what? What happened? He has taken another's measured allotment, Lachesis breathed. The leaden weight of consequence, he took it from David's thread and tied it to his own. This is not in the design. He has broken the tapestry. He saved a life, Clotho cried. Or, Lachesis said, watching the dark weight settle onto Mark's fragile, newly balanced thread, he has just doomed all three. In the Nexus, the universe shuddered. It was not a sound. It was a recoil. Lachesis, the allotter, stumbled back from the loom, her hands flying to her mouth. The leaden weight of consequence, the dark, heavy allotment she had so carefully measured and attached to David Chen's rusty red thread, had just jumped. In a violent, unnatural twang of fate, the weight had lifted from David's line and slammed itself onto Mark Jefferson's. Mark's thread, a complex weave of ambitious blue, healing violet, and new white truth, buckled instantly under the sudden, impossible burden. The entire tapestry around it warped, the adjacent threads screaming in protest. You said that was impossible, Clotho whispered, her voice trembling. You said allotments are fixed. You said they are absolute. They are, Lachesis breathed, her mind racing, trying to comprehend what she had just seen. He did not change the allotment. He stole it. He paid for it. She stared, horrified and fascinated. Mark Jefferson just bought his brother-in-law's consequence. He traded his own allotment of financial security, which I had just balanced with his demotion, and he exchanged it for David's debt. Voluntarily. No one has ever done that. And then the third sister, Atropos, moved. Her head, which had been tracking David's thread, snapped with alarming speed. Her ancient final gaze left David, now free and light, and fixed itself with absolute terrifying precision on Mark. His thread was now dangerously, impossibly heavy. He was the one whose line was now strained to the breaking point. He was the one Atropos was now watching. In Sarah's apartment, the two loan sharks looked at Mark, then at each other. The first one took the credit card. You're either the bravest man I've ever met or the stupidest. We'll be in touch to finalize the restructuring. Don't leave town, architect. They left. The door clicked shut, leaving a vacuum of sound in the room. Mark Jefferson, his hands still outstretched, sank onto the nearest chair. His legs gave out. The adrenaline was gone, replaced by a cold, arctic terror. He was shaking violently. "Mark?" Sarah whispered, her voice sounding very far away. "Mark, what did you just do?" He looked up, his eyes unfocused. I think I just bought us time." David Chen, who had been silent, pale, and sobered by the reality of his own end, finally spoke. His voice was a raw croak. You're insane. That was $200,000. That's not time. That's a high-interest cash advance. The VIG. Mark, you just why?" Mark looked at David. The mirror of his failure. Chaos. "Because," Mark said, his white thread of truth forcing the words out. "'Cause I know what it's like to be at the bottom, terrified. And because I am not letting anyone hurt her. Ever." Sarah let out a sound, a half-sob, as the scale of his sacrifice landed on her. "Mark, no. You can't, that's ruin." Her pink thread flared with panic. You're a parking garage architect. You can't pay that. You've destroyed yourself." "I know," Mark said, his voice quiet. He was still shaking, but his mind was clearing, the blue thread of order and logic clicking back into place. "I can't." Not alone. He looked, with a new, hard intensity, at David Chen. David, who was used to being seen as a burden, flinched. "You," Mark said. "You did this. You're a venture capitalist. You charmed billions out of investors. You know money. I don't. I just know buildings. This," he gestured to the air, to the massive invisible debt. "This is your world. I just paid the entry fee." He stood up, grabbing the chair for support. "Now you are going to help me fix it." In the Nexus, Lachesis stared. He is not just carrying the weight. He is using it. He is weaponizing it. He is forcing David's thread of chaos to work with his thread of order to defeat the consequence I allotted. He's forging an alliance. Clotho whispered. David was floored. He had been called a failure. He had been called a ghost. He had never in his entire life been called necessary. You want my help?" David stammered. "To fix the mess I made? The one you just ate?" "You owe her," Mark said, nodding to Sarah, who was watching with wide, stunned eyes. "And now you owe me. I don't need your charm. I don't need your luck. I need that substance you never had. It's time to learn. We all are." Sarah took a shaky breath. Panic was receding, replaced by a fragile, fierce resolve. "And I," she said, her pink thread glowing, "am getting my gigs back. I will play. I will earn. We are all in this." A new, complex, and powerful weave was forming in the apartment. The team, truly forged in the fires of consequence. Lachesis watched, her face grim. They have formed an alliance. A beautiful, human, arrogant alliance. They think they can fix this. They think they can work their way out of it. She pointed to the loom, where the dark, leaden weight now sat squarely on Mark's thread. "They do not understand," she said. "An allotment of consequence must be paid. The weight does not just vanish because you are sorry. It will demand a price. An Atropos, she is no longer waiting for David. She is now waiting for Mark's thread to snap." The grand, suicidal gesture was complete. The adrenaline was gone. The loan sharks had left. And the reality settled into the small Chicago apartment like a physical, freezing fog. $200,000. Plus interest. Plus Sarah's back rent. All on a man who had just been demoted to designing a parking garage. The team that had been forged in the fire of that confrontation now had to face the mundane, crushing, soul-destroying work. In the Nexus, the atmosphere was just as tense. "They cannot do it," Lachesis, the allotment stated. She was watching Mark's thread, which was now pulsing with a dark, heavy, sickly throb. The leaden weight of consequence he had stolen from David was designed to be ruinous. The allotment is absolute. He has taken a weight that is not his, and it will break him. It is a matter of time. Atropos, the ender, watched Mark's thread, her simple iron shears held at the ready. She was no longer just waiting. She was anticipating. The next few months were not a romance. They were a grind. Mark Jefferson, the former Golden Boy architect, became a ghost. He worked his 40-hour week at the firm, his blue thread of ambition reduced to the simple, dull utility of drawing concrete boxes. He was humble. He was quiet. He was on probation. And the second he clocked out, he went to a shared office space where he took on freelance drafting projects, the cash jobs he used to find demeaning. He was coding building specs, checking blueprints for suburban contractors. He was sleeping on average 4 hours a night. Sarah Chen, her pink thread of compassion now woven with a new steel-gray fiber of hustle, was relentless. She was not just playing music. She was monetizing her art. She taught cello to impatient children, she played weddings every single weekend, she joined a string quartet that played corporate events. She was turning her passion into a commodity, her pink thread growing thin from the strain of it. And David Chen, his rusty red thread of chaos, was, for the first time, developing a pattern. The iron fiber of toil, which Lachesis had given him, was finally being used. He was, surprisingly, the first one to find a job. He couldn't be a venture capitalist. His name was toxic. But he could crunch numbers. He got an entry-level job at a mid-level accounting firm. He was, ironically, an auditor. He was good at it. He, who had charmed his way through life, was now finding a strange, cold comfort in the absolute truth of a spreadsheet. The three of them lived in Sarah's apartment. It was no longer a home. It was a base of operations. Spreadsheets were taped to the walls. 3 alarm clocks went off at different, staggered hours. The only thing they shared was exhaustion and a single unified goal, paying off the weight. In the Nexus, Clotho watched, her expression one of pained wonder. They're doing it, Lachesis. They are miserable. They are exhausted. But they are carrying it. All three of them. The weight is still there, but they are sharing it. Even though it's only tied to Mark's thread. They are surviving, Lachesis corrected, her voice tight. They are not winning. The weight is designed to be heavier than one man can bear. And he is the one who took it. Look at his thread. Clotho looked. Mark's thread was fraying. The leaden weight was causing microscopic stress fractures. His blue was almost gone. His violet was strained. The white thread of truth was the only thing holding him together, but it too was becoming transparent. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. Mark was at his desk, staring at the schematic for a ventilation shaft in the parking garage. He had been awake for 50 hours straight, trying to finish a freelance job and his actual job. His manager, a man named Henderson, dropped a set of plans on his desk. Jefferson, these schematics are a mess. They're late, and the load-bearing calculations are wrong. Is this the brilliance Alan was so keen on keeping? Mark stared at the plans. The gray thread of his father's shame, the one he thought he'd beaten, flared. But it was not fear he felt. It was nothing. He was just empty. It's a parking garage, Mark whispered. What? Henderson asked. It's a parking garage, Mark suddenly yelled, standing up so fast his chair flew back. It's a concrete box for cars. Who cares? Who cares? He swept his arm across the desk. Blueprints, models, and coffee cups crashed to the floor. The office went silent. Mark stood there, shaking, tears of pure, abject exhaustion streaming down his face. He was broken. In the Nexus, Mark's thread snapped taut, vibrating at a frequency that signaled total system failure. Atropos leaned in. Her hand lifted. The shears opened. This was the moment. The consequence was being paid. No! Clotho cried. Just as Henderson was about to call security, a voice cut through the silence. Excuse me. David Chen, in his own ill-fitting suit, walked into the office. He looked calm. He looked professional. I'm sorry, David said to Henderson, radiating an aura of his old effortless charm, but it was different now. It was grounded. I am Mark's accountant. He has been under a severe short-term financial strain due to a family medical emergency. His inheritance just came through and it's a mess. I'm here to take him home. This was a one-time incident. He's one of your best assets." Henderson, flustered by this sudden confident accountant, found himself nodding. Right. Well, get him sorted out then. David walked over to Mark, who was just staring, broken. He put a hand on his shoulder. "Come on, architect," he said softly. "Let's go home." David, the agent of chaos, helped his sister's savior out of the office. In the Nexus, Atropos paused. Her shears hovered. The thread was still at its limit, but it was no longer snapping. Lachesis stared, her mouth agape. He was at his end. The thread was ready to be cut. "But, David," Clotho whispered. David interfered. "The chaos just saved the order." "This interdependence," Lachesis murmured, watching David's red thread actively reinforcing Mark's blue. "This was not in the design. They are weaving their own threads together to support the weight. They are defying the allotment." She looked at the leaden weight, which was still firmly attached to Mark's line. "But the weight is still there. Must be paid. If hard work and exhaustion won't break them, what else will the consequence demand?" David Chen half-carried, half-walked Mark Jefferson back to the apartment. The agent of chaos was, for the first time, acting as an agent of order. He had saved the architect. When they entered, Sarah, who had been pacing, her pink thread vibrating with anxiety, rushed forward. She saw Mark's state, not angry, not sad, just empty. The shell of a man who had been pushed past his limit. "Oh, Mark," she breathed. She and David guided him to the couch, where he collapsed, asleep before his head hit the pillow. Sarah looked at her brother. Her eyes were full of a new, complex emotion, gratitude. You saved him. You saved his job." "Thank you, David." David looked awkward and used to genuine praise. His rusty red thread, which had been chaotic, was now a steady, dark maroon. He looked at Mark, the man who had taken his ruinous debt. "He saved me," David said, his voice rough. We're just balancing the books." In the Nexus, Clotho felt a surge of hope. "They did it, Lachesis. They're working together. David saved Mark. The weight can't break them if they share it. Their interdependence, it's stronger than your allotment." "You are a fool, sister," Lachesis said, her voice sharp. "You see one act. I see the design. The leaden weight of consequence is not just toil or exhaustion. It is temptation. It is the echo of the flaw that created it." She pointed to the loom. The heavy, dark weight on Mark's thread, which had been straining his line, suddenly pulsed with a new, insidious, seductive energy. "They have resisted the grind," Lachesis murmured. "Now the weight will try seduction, a shortcut. And the test is not for Mark. It is for David." A few days later, the grind was back on. Mark was recovering, having been ordered by both Sarah and David to take 2 days off. David was at his accounting firm, working late. He was good at this. The numbers didn't lie. They were honest. He was auditing a high-value corporate account, and he found it. A discrepancy. A ghost account. A series of untraced offshore transfers. It was a classic embezzlement scheme, sloppy but effective. And it was exactly the kind of clever financial maneuver the old David Chen would have admired. He stared at the screen. He saw the numbers. He saw the loophole. He saw a path. With a few keystrokes, he could redirect those funds. Not even all of them. Just a piece. Just $200,000. In the Nexus, the leaden weight on Mark's thread glowed. It was offering a solution. "There," Lachesis said, her voice low. "The test. The consequence is presenting him with a choice. He can end their grind. He can pay the debt. He can be the hero and save them both." "But that's stealing," Clotho cried. "It is," Lachesis agreed. "All he has to do is be exactly who he used to be. The man who caused the consequence in the first place." David sat alone in the dark, the monitor illuminating his face. He thought of the grind. He thought of Sarah's hands, her fingers calloused and raw from the cello strings. He thought of Mark, the brilliant architect, broken and crying over a parking garage. He could fix it. He could fix it right now. He could be the savior. His rusty red thread of chaos flared, the fiber of charm and deceit igniting. It would be easy. His fingers moved to the keyboard. He typed in the access code. "No, David, no," Clotho whispered at the loom. "That's the old way. That's the flaw." "It is the consequence, sister," Lachesis said, her voice grim. "It demands payment. It does not care if the payment is earned or stolen. It just wants to be fed. It is the nature of debt." Atropos, the ender, shifted her gaze. Her eyes were now locked on David's thread. If he hit enter, he would be reverting to his original failed design. He would be severing the iron thread of toil he had just begun to spin. He would be proving his thread was a dead end. David's finger hovered over the enter key. He saw the money ready to move. He saw freedom. And then he saw Mark's face. Not the broken man, but the man in the apartment, his voice raw with a new, terrifying honesty. "I was a coward. I ran." He saw Mark, the architect, who had chosen the wait rather than run. David took his hand off the keyboard. He was breathing hard. He was tempted. He was so tempted. But the iron thread of toil, the real substance he had earned through real work, was, for the first time, stronger than the red thread of chaos. David Chen leaned back in his chair. He picked up his desk phone. He dialed. "Yeah, hi. This is David Chen in auditing. You need to get Mr. Henderson on the line. I'm in the Miller-Thompson account and I've just found a major multi-million-dollar fraud." He had made his choice. In the Nexus, Lachesis actually took a step back. He resisted. He chose toil over theft. He chose the grind over the shortcut. "He's winning," Clotho cheered, tears of relief in her eyes. "They're winning." "No," Lachesis said, her face dark and troubled as she watched the loom. "They are surviving. The consequence failed to break them with exhaustion. And it has failed to corrupt them with temptation." She looked at Clotho, her eyes full of a new, cold dread. "The weight is still there. Must be paid. It has one last terrible weapon. If it cannot break them apart from the inside, it will demand a sacrifice." In the Nexus, Lachesis, the allotment, found herself in a state she had never before experienced. She was impressed. David Chen, the failure, the chaos, had resisted the temptation of his own flaw. He had chosen the iron of toil over the red of theft. "They are resilient," she murmured. "They're winning," Clotho cheered, wiping tears from her eyes. "They're beating your allotment, sister. The love and hard work, it's enough." "You still do not understand," Lachesis snapped, her newfound admiration replaced by a cold dread. "You cannot be an allotment of this magnitude. You cannot defy the design. You can only pay it. They have resisted how it breaks them, but they have not paid the price. The leaden weight is still there. It is angry." She pointed to the loom. The weight on Mark's thread was pulsing with a dark, impatient, hungry energy. "It will no longer try to break them from the inside," Lachesis said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "It will no longer test or tempt. It will simply collect." Atropos, the ender, did not move. But her grip on her simple iron shears tightened. She was watching Mark's thread. She was waiting for the collection. The next few weeks were the best the team had known. The grind was still the grind, but they had a rhythm. David Chen, for finding the multi-million-dollar fraud, had been given a promotion. He was a junior analyst. His rusty red thread was now almost completely obscured by a strong, steady iron fiber. He was substance. Sarah Chen, with her newfound confidence, had landed a prestigious weekly gig at a high-end jazz club. Her pink thread was bright, and the violet connection to Mark was vibrant. Mark Jefferson was still designing the parking garage. But he was happy. He was finding a new challenge in it. He was finding, as he told Sarah, the architecture and the utility. He was home by 7. He was sleeping. They were in the apartment, all 3 of them. They had just made a massive payment on the debt. They were laughing. They were, against all odds, a family. That night, Mark was walking home from the subway. It was late. He was tired, but it was a good tired. His thread was balanced. He walked under a flickering streetlight. A dark, heavy sedan pulled up beside him, its engine silent. The doors opened. 2 men from Chapter 12 got out. the agents of the weight. Mr. Jefferson, the first one said. The architect. You've been busy. Mark's blood ran cold. The leaden weight on his thread, which had been dormant, suddenly felt crushing. We've been making the payments, he said, his voice steady. We doubled them like we agreed. The associates are tired of waiting, the second man said, stepping in front of him. The deal has been renegotiated. They want the principal. All of it. Tonight. That's... Mark stammered. That's impossible. We don't have it. Do you know that? We know, the first man said. He cracked his knuckles. That's the point. The weight must be paid. An allotment of consequence always collects. And you're the one who signed for it. This was the sacrifice Lachesis had foretold. Payment wasn't money. It was him. His thread carried the weight, so he was the collateral. The men moved toward him. Hey! A voice from the shadows. David Chen stepped out, holding a bag of groceries. He'd been walking home from his late job. He saw the men. He saw Mark. He understood instantly. Leave him alone, David said, dropping his bag. The debt is mine. He took it, the first man sneered. It's his name on the paper. It's his problem. He's the asset, David said, his iron thread flaring with a new sacrificial light. I'm the liability. You want to collect? You want your pound of flesh? Collect from me. David shoved Mark hard toward the street. Run, Mark. Go. Get out of here. Tell her I balanced the books. In the Nexus, Clotho screamed. No. David, no. Lachesis stared, her hand over her heart. He's stealing the weight back. On the loom, a violent twang. David's iron thread of toil was actively, forcibly pulling the leaden weight off Mark's thread. It's a voluntary exchange. Lachesis cried. The original Allotment is reclaiming his consequence. The weight was his. The men, angry at the interference, turned on David. David! No! Mark yelled, stumbling, but David stood his ground. It's okay, Mark. David yelled back. It's my design. Not yours. Go. Live. One of the men lunged, angry and impatient. A glint of metal in the dim light. In the Nexus, the leaden weight transferred fully back to David's thread. The red and iron line, which had just found its strength, was suddenly burdened with the full, catastrophic consequence and the physical trauma. Snapped. Atropos, who had been watching Mark, swiveled. Her gaze found David's thread. It was severed. Her shears, which had been waiting for Mark, lifted and cut. On the street, David Chen looked at Mark. The chaos was gone. His face was, for the first time, at peace. He slumped to the ground. The men, realizing what had just happened, panicked. They jumped into their car and sped off into the night. Mark was left on the empty, silent street. His thread was suddenly terribly, painfully light. The weight was gone. He ran to David. He knelt beside him. But the iron thread was cut. The Redeemer was gone. The consequence had been paid. In the Nexus, Lachesis was in profound shock. The allotment is satisfied. The weight has been paid by a life. But he was good. Clotho wept. He redeemed himself. It's not fair. He did, Lachesis said, her voice filled with a terrible new awe. He spun a thread of iron, and he chose to sacrifice it. He redefined his end. He did not die a failure. She looked at the weeping Clotho. He died a redeemer. Atropos, her duty done, lowered her shears and bowed her head. In the Nexus, for the first time in an eon, there was silence. Atropos, the Ender, had lowered her shears. Her work for this particular violent intersection was done. She resumed her pose of perfect, patient stillness. Clotho, the spinner, was weeping. She watched the space on the loom where David Chen's thread, once a chaotic, superficial red and finally a strong, tempered iron, had been. Now there was just a hole. An echo. It's gone, she whispered. He was just getting so strong. He was good. And you just cut him. Lachesis, the allotment, did not look at her sister. Her gaze was fixed on the tapestry. She was profoundly, deeply shaken. "I did not cut him," Lachesis said, her voice hollow. "He chose." She pointed to the loom. His allotment was consequence. It was a leaden weight of his own making. He could have paid it with a life of ruin. He could have paid it with theft, as he was tempted. He could have paid it slowly through toil. But instead, he chose sacrifice. She traced the empty space. He paid the weight in a single instant with his life. It is the highest, most absolute payment. The allotment is satisfied. The weight is gone. The weight was gone. On the cold, dark Chicago street, Mark Jefferson knelt, his hands trembling, his thread suddenly horribly light. Crushing, $200,000 burden that had defined his every waking moment was lifted. But in its place was a new, suffocating weight. The weight of the price. David Chen was not moving. His eyes were open, staring up at the flickering streetlight, his face, which had been a mask of chaos and bitterness, now strangely, terribly peaceful. The aftermath was cold, sterile, and procedural. Police. Statements. A funeral. It was a gray, overcast day. The cheap coffin was suspended over the dark, empty earth. There were only two mourners, Mark and Sarah. Sarah was numb. Her pink thread was a pale, shell-shocked white. She was grieving the brother she had lost twice. First to success, and now, just as she was finding him, to redemption. Mark was a statue of guilt. He had done the math. David had died for him. He had stepped in. He had taken the consequence back. The white thread of truth that Mark had spun was now a brutal weapon against himself. "This is your fault. He died for the debt. You took the debt. He died for you." In the Nexus, Lachesis watched Mark's thread. "Look," she said to Clotho. "The leaden weight is gone. But he is not free. David's cut, his sacrifice, it has left a scar." On the loom, where David's iron thread had pulled the weight from Mark's line, a new, permanent mark had been seared into Mark's weave. It was not a flaw. It was a knot. A dark, iron-colored, unremovable debt of life. Back in the apartment, the silence was louder than the sirens had been. The spreadsheets were gone. The budget charts were taken down. The debt was paid. The grind was over. But the apartment was empty. David's couch was just a couch. Mark stood by the window, staring at the parking garage he was designing. I should have been faster," he said, his voice thick. "I should have pushed him. I should have. It was my debt, Sarah. I took it. He died for me." Sarah, who had been sitting, wrapped in a blanket, finally looked up. Her pink thread of compassion, which had been frozen in grief, began to glow with a faint, clear warmth. "No," she said, her voice surprisingly firm. Mark turned. "What?" "No, Mark," she said, standing up. "He didn't die for you. And he didn't die for me. He died for David." For the first time in his life, he saw a consequence through to the end. He chose his ending. He chose to balance the books, just like he said. She walked over to him, her eyes clear though full of tears. "He spent his whole life running, just like you did. But at the end, he didn't run. He finished. It's the one choice, the one action that was truly, completely his. Don't you dare take that away from him by making it about you." Mark stared at her. He saw her pain, her strength. And he understood. It wasn't a sacrifice for him. It was a redemption for David. He pulled her close and they wept together. The iron knot on his thread, the debt of life, didn't vanish. It didn't stop hurting, but it settled. It ceased to be a guilt and became a remembrance. A dark, strong thread of iron, woven permanently alongside the violet of his love. In the Nexus, Clotho watched the two threads clinging together. They're healing." "Yes," Lachesis said. She looked at the tapestry, now stable. The consequence arc was, at last, complete. They have survived the great weight. They have paid the price. She turned her gaze from them, looking further down the loom at the tapestry yet to be woven. "The consequence is paid," Lachesis murmured. "But time does not stop. The inheritance, Mark's gray thread, is still part of his design. And his ambition as blue thread is still there, just dormant." She pointed years into their future. "And there is another great intersection measured. Not a consequence this time, but a creation. Time in the realm of the fates is a river, but in the lives of mortals it is a relentless ticking clock. In the Nexus, the great loom continued its work. The hole left by David Chen's severed thread had been woven over, the tapestry around it scarred but stable. 5 years had passed. Clotho, the spinner, watched the thread that had once been 2 and then 3 and was now 2 again. The violet connection between Mark and Sarah was the dominant color. It was a deep, mature, and powerful weave interwoven with the bright white of Mark's truth, the deep rose of Sarah's compassion, and the dark, strong iron of David's remembrance. "It's beautiful," Clotho said softly. "After all that, all the weight and the sacrifice, it's the strongest weave on the loom." "It is balanced," Lachesis the Allator conceded. Her gaze was, for once, appreciative. "The consequence has been paid. The inheritance has been managed. And now," she pointed to a spot on the loom just ahead of their present moment. "It is time. The great intersection I measured long ago. Not a consequence, but a creation. A new thread?" Clotho asked, her eyes lighting up, her fingers twitching. "Yes," Lachesis said. "But this one we do not spin. Not in the old way. This one they spin themselves." In a small, quiet suburb of Chicago, in a modest house with a garden, Mark Jefferson was home from work. He was 31. He was a senior project manager at his firm. He was no longer the parking garage guy, but he was not the museum guy either. He was reliable. He was steady. He was the man who designed the architecture of the utility, the schools, the community centers, the libraries. His blue thread of ambition was calm, repurposed. His gray thread of fear was dormant. Sarah was in the living room, her cello leaning against the wall. She was teaching music at a local high school, and her pink thread was a deep, warm, and constant glow. He kissed her. It was a quiet, comfortable kiss. "I have something to tell you," she said, her voice trying to be calm, but her pink thread was vibrating with a new, bright, golden energy. "What is it?" he asked. "I'm pregnant." In the Nexus, it happened. A new, impossibly bright, unspun thread sparked into existence, hovering in the space between Mark's and Sarah's. "It's here!" Clotho cried, moving toward the raw material of souls. "Let me spin it." "No," Lachesis said, holding up a hand. "Wait. Look." They watched as the threads of Mark and Sarah reached out to the new, nascent line. Fibers of blue ambition, pink compassion, white truth, and even the dark iron of David's sacrifice, they all began to weave themselves into the new thread, spinning it, coloring it, creating it. Mark was speechless. Then a slow white grin. He was overjoyed. He swept Sarah into his arms, lifting her off the ground. He was going to be a father. And then a sudden cold jolt. In the Nexus, Lachesis nodded as if expecting it. And now, the gray thread of inheritance, the shadow of Mark's father, which had been dormant for 5 years, flickered. Mark's smile faded. He put Sarah down, his hands still on her arms. "A child," he whispered. I'm going to be a father. But what if?" The old cold voice was back. "What if I'm not good enough? What if I'm like my father? What if I fail him?" At the same time, his blue thread of ambition flared, not with glory but with panic. "This house," he thought, "it's too small. My job, it's steady, but it's not enough. I need more. For him. I need the museum. I need..." "Lachesis!" Clotho cried in alarm. "The gray thread. It's back. After all this time. And his ambition is hurting him." "Of course," Lachesis said calmly. "A thread is not destroyed, sister. It is only balanced. A creation is the ultimate test of that balance. His old flaws, his inheritance, are no longer about himself. They are about his legacy." Mark was quiet, his face pale, his eyes wide with the old familiar doubt. Sarah, who knew his weave better than he did, saw the gray flicker in his eyes. She touched his face. "Mark? What is it? I thought you'd be happy." He looked at her, and the white thread of truth, the one he had earned, battled the gray fear. The white thread won. "I am," he said, his voice rough. I'm terrified. I'm terrified I'll be like him. That I'll be cold. That I'll put work first." Sarah smiled. It was a soft, knowing, powerful smile. Her pink thread enveloped his gray and blue and quieted them. "You're not your father, Mark," she said. "You ran for me. You chose me. You chose this. You threw away a museum for a parking garage. Your father, he would never have been strong enough to do that." She took his hand and placed it on her stomach. "You're already the man he never was." Mark let out the breath he'd been holding. The gray thread receded, balanced by the violet and white. The blue thread cooled, its panic settling into a steady, warm fiber of provision. In the nexus, the new thread began to spin, a beautiful, complex, multicolored line. Lachesis nodded, pleased. "The creation is balanced. The inheritance is in check." Her gaze, satisfied, turned from them. She scanned the rest of the vast loom and her face tightened. Clotho, noticing her look, followed her gaze. She saw the jade green thread of Emily Hayes, the woman from Austin, the one from Chapter 2. "Oh, Lachesis," Clotho whispered, her voice full of a new dread. "Thalator is pleased with one weave," Lachesis said. "But the spinner is not." Clotho pointed to Emily's thread. "Lachesis, look. The resilience you allotted her, the strength you said she would need from that sacrifice she made." Emily's thread was thin, frayed, and a dark, sickly color. "It's not enough," Clotho cried. "The trial you predicted, it's here. And she is breaking." The focus of the fates snapped away from the stable, healing weave of Mark and Sarah. A new, frantic energy was pulling at them from another section of the loom. Clotho, the spinner, pointed, her voice filled with panic. "Lachesis, look. The jade green thread. Emily Hayes." Lachesis, the allotter, was already there, her expression a mask of clinical, cold concern. She was studying the thread she had so carefully measured 7 years prior. "The trial, it is here," Lachesis said. "But you said she would be ready." Clotho cried. "You said the silver thread of duty was her reward. You said it would give her the resilience she needed. Look at it, Lachesis. Her thread it's brittle. That resilience fiber, it's not enough." Lachesis was silent. She was rechecking her measurements. The allotment had been correct. The trial had arrived precisely as scheduled. The resilience fiber was in place. "But what is the trial?" Clotho demanded. "What is this great trial that the strength of sacrifice cannot handle?" 7 years had passed in Austin, Texas. Emily Hayes was, by all accounts, a success. Just as Lachesis had predicted, her mother had recovered from her illness, the silver thread of duty, and Emily, choosing to stay in Austin, had used her jade green creativity to build her own design firm. It was small, respected, and profitable. She lived in a beautiful, minimalist house that she had designed herself. She had won awards. She was strong. She was resilient. The trial, it turned out, was not a great fire or a terrible illness. The trial Lachesis had measured was time. Emily's mother had passed away peacefully a year ago. The silver thread of duty its purpose served had faded. Emily, now 35, stood in her perfect silent kitchen. Her jade green thread was strong, yes, but it was alone. She had given everything to her duty and her work. The golden thread of the New York job she had sacrificed was now just a pale, distant what if. She had become the resilience Lachesis had given her. She was tough. She was unbreakable. And she was completely, totally, and profoundly empty. Her resilience had prepared her to endure a hardship. It had not prepared her for what came after. It had no power against the vast, echoing silence of loneliness. In the nexus, Lachesis saw her mistake. I made an error in the design," she whispered. Clotho, who had never heard her sister admit fault, was stunned. "What?" "I allotted her resilience to survive the trial," Lachesis explained, her voice tight with a dawning horror. "I did not allot her connection to live after it. I gave her strength, but I forgot to measure joy. Her thread has nothing to hold on to. It has no purpose." Atropos, the ender, who had been resting, slowly tilted her head. She was not yet reaching for her shears. But she was noticing. A thread that has no purpose, no connections, no will to weave, it withers. It becomes a candidate for trimming. In her Austin home, Emily Hayes looked at the awards on her shelf. They meant nothing. She looked at her phone. No new messages. She walked to her bathroom. She opened the cabinet. She looked at a full bottle of sleeping pills. Her jade green thread, which had been so vibrant, stretched thin, became pale, became almost transparent. It was fading. Lachesis, do something, Clotho screamed. She's giving up. Bin something. Allot her hope. I cannot, Lachesis said, a rare panic in her voice. My authority is in the measurement of the thread at the beginning. I cannot just add a new fiber to the middle of the weave. It is not in the design. He's not a failure, Sarah said, her voice firm, her pink thread of compassion. Clotho, her eyes wild with the spinner's empathy, looked at the fading thread. She looked at her sister, the allotter, who was bound by her own rules. To hell with the design, Clotho said. Before Lachesis could stop her, Clotho, the spinner, the one who only touched the beginning, reached her hand into the center of the great loom. It was a violation of the highest order. Her fingers darted through the billions of active threads. She found Emily's jade green line, and right next to it she found a tiny dormant thread. A what-if line. A man from Emily's college days, one who had almost asked her out, but fate had intervened. A missed connection Lachesis had deemed non-essential. Clotho grabbed the dormant thread, and she flicked it. It was a small, rebellious, illegal act. She forced the dormant thread to intersect with Emily's jade green line. In Austin, Emily Hayes, her hand shaking, held the bottle of pills. The jade green thread was a moment from snapping. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She ignored it. Buzzed again. Text message. Annoyed, she looked. It was from a number she didn't recognize. But the name. Hey Emily. This is really random. It's Jake Peterson. From college. Hi. I'm in Austin for a new job. I was wondering if you were still here. Emily stared at the screen. Jake Peterson. Her jade green thread, which had been seconds from dissolving, latched onto the new, unexpected intersection. It was not fixed. It was not healed. But it held. In the nexus, Atropos lowered her gaze. The withering had stopped. Lachesis, however, turned to Clotho, and her face was furious. You know that is forbidden, Lachesis hissed, her voice like ice. You are the spinner. You do not touch the middle weave. You have no idea what you have just done. You have changed the design. You have introduced a variable. The Nexus was no longer a place of quiet, cosmic work. It was a courtroom, and Lachesis, the allotment, was the prosecution. You forced an intersection, Lachesis hissed, her voice vibrating with a cold, controlled fury. The design is absolute. You do not touch the middle weave. Your design was killing her. Clotho, the spinner, shot back. Her creator's empathy had overridden her fear of her sister. She was dying, Lachesis. Of loneliness. An error you made. I gave her a chance. A chance? Lachesis scoffed. You did not give her a chance. You stole from another thread. That man, Jake Peterson, his allotment was measured. He was on a path. He was destined to move to Boston in 6 months for a new position. He was measured to meet a woman there. A woman named Amanda, whose own thread has been woven to intersect with his. Clotho's face went pale. What? You, in your impulsive emotional folly, you have just stolen a piece of his destiny to patch hers. You have not saved Emily. You have just doomed Amanda. That is the price of your variable, Lachesis said. You have introduced chaos. In Austin, Emily Hayes was still standing in her bathroom, her hand on the cold porcelain. The bottle of sleeping pills was in her other hand. Her phone was on the counter. Jake Peterson. Her jade green thread, which had been seconds from dissolving, was clinging to this new, impossible intersection. It was the first new fiber that had touched her thread in years. It was a variable. It was hope. She had a choice. She could ignore it. The thread would detach. The withering would resume. Atropos, she sensed, was not far. Or she could answer. Slowly, her fingers uncurled from the pill bottle. She set it down. She picked up her phone, her fingers shaking. She typed. Jake? Wow. That is a name from the past. Yes, I'm still here. In the Nexus, the moment she sent the reply, the intersecting thread locked onto her jade green line. It was no longer a variable. It was a knot. Lachesis winced as if struck. A shockwave, just like the one Sarah's pain had sent, emanated from this new illegal knot. It rippled across the tapestry. Miles away on the loom, a thread belonging to a woman in Boston suddenly frayed. A hole. A missed connection had just been torn in her weave. "You see?" Lachesis whispered, horrified. "The damage. All to satisfy your pity." We will fix hers too," Clotho stammered, watching the damage she had caused. "We cannot," Lachesis said. "The loom is not a hobby, sister. It is causality. You cannot just reweave what you have torn." 2 days later, Emily Hayes sat in a coffee shop. Her jade green thread was humming with a new, terrified but alive energy. He walked in. Jake Peterson. Older, sadder eyes, but the same kind smile. "Emily," he said. "Jake," she replied. It was awkward. Clumsy. He was a widower, it turned out. His wife had died 2 years ago. He had a young son. The job in Austin wasn't just a job. It was a fresh start. His thread was a gray-blue sadness mixed with provision for his child. Her jade-green resilience met his gray-blue need. It was not the fiery, destined violet of Mark and Sarah. It was not a grand passion. It was hesitant. It was real. He talked about his son. She talked about her design firm. I need a fresh start," he said. "And I need help. My son, he's struggling. And I'm in a new city. I know what it's like to be resilient," she said, a small, true smile on her face. "And I have a lot of time." Her resilience, which had been useless against loneliness, was exactly what his sadness needed. And his need, his son, his new life, was exactly the purpose her thread had been starving for. In the Nexus, Clotho watched, a tear rolling down her cheek. "Look, Lachesis. It's working. They are healing each other. Your design was wrong. My variable, it was right." "It is not right," Lachesis said, her face grim, watching the new weave form. "It is just new. You have created a new design. But a design you did not measure. You have no idea what the ultimate consequence of this new, chaotic weave will be." A new voice for the first time spoke. It was not a whisper. It was not a shout. It was the sound of dust and rust. The sound of a final, closing door. "You have both broken the rules." Lachesis and Clotho froze. They turned. Atropos, the Ender, the silent third sister, was standing. She had risen from her chair. "You," she said, her dead, ancient eyes fixing on Lachesis. "Your design failed. Your allotment was flawed. The mortal Emily was dying." She turned her gaze to Clotho. "And you. Your interference broke the weave. You saved one and doomed another, Amanda." She looked back at the tapestry, at the scar left by David Chen. "And before that, the mortal mark's stolen allotment." The leaden weight. Her voice dropped, and the entire Nexus seemed to grow cold. "The system is broken. The design is corrupted." Atropos, the inflexible, lifted her simple iron shears. "And a corrupted tapestry must be cleansed." The words hung in the infinite Nexus, colder and heavier than any leaden weight. "A corrupted tapestry must be cleansed." Clotho, the spinner, trembled. She had spun new, bright souls for millennia, and for the first time she felt cold. "Cleansed," Clotho whispered, taking a step back from her silent, standing sister. What do you mean, cleansed?" "You cut the ends. You don't cleanse." Lachesis, the allotment, was rigid. Her mind, which saw all designs, was finally seeing the true design of their own existence. She stared at Atropos, not as her sister, but as a function. She is Atropos," Lachesis breathed, a new, profound terror in her voice. "We were wrong. We thought her name meant inflexible, unturnable. We thought she was just the ender of lives." She looked at her younger sister. "Clotho, she is not just our sister. She is the enforcer. She is the operating system. She is the rules we have been breaking." Atropos, the Ender, turned her head. her ancient eyes, devoid of malice or love, fixed on Lachesis. "The design is law," Atropos said, her voice the sound of a tomb closing. "You, Lachesis, were given the duty of measurement. You, Clotho, were given the duty of beginning. I was given the duty of finality. But above all, we were given the duty of order." She gestured to the vast, shimmering, and now flawed loom. "The order is broken." She pointed to the scar left by David Chen's sacrifice. A mortal, Mark Jefferson, defied his design. He stole an allotment. She pointed to the jade green thread of Emily Hayes. A fate, Lachesis, failed her design. Her allotment was flawed. She pointed to the new illegal knot connecting Emily and Jake. And a fate, Clotho, corrupted the design. She interfered. Atropos took a step. "The chaos you, Clotho, call hope, the interdependency, Lachesis, are beginning to see as evolution. It is a virus. It has corrupted the source code. The tapestry is unreliable." "Sister, no," Clotho pleaded. "It's not a virus. It's messy. It's life. It's beautiful. It is corrupt," Atropos stated. "And a virus cannot be repaired. It must be purged." She did not move toward Emily's thread. She did not move toward Mark's. She turned her back on her sisters. She began to walk, her steps slow and final, toward the very center of the great loom. She walked toward the nexus spindle, the core, the origin point, the place where all threads began. Lachesis, realizing her intent, screamed. It was not a sound of logic. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated terror. "No. No, Atropos. That is the spindle. That is the source. If you cut that, you'll unravel it all," Clotho cried, rushing forward. "You'll kill everyone. Not just Mark, not just Emily. Everyone. You will end time." "I will cleanse it," Atropos said, her voice absolute. "I will end this corrupted design. And you?" She glanced back at Clotho. "You can spin a new one. Clean one. A better one. That is the order of things. That is my duty." She reached the spindle. It was a column of pure, white, blinding light, the origin of all potential. She raised her simple iron shears. And for the first time in the real world, the cleansing was felt. In Chicago, Mark and Sarah were asleep, their new baby dreaming in his crib. Suddenly, the violet thread of their connection flickered. The baby's new, bright thread stuttered. In Austin, Emily and Jake were laughing, walking out of a restaurant on their second date. Her jade green thread flickered. In Los Angeles, in Boston, in every city, on every continent, every single thread on the loom flickered. Time itself seemed to skip. In the Nexus, Clotho grabbed Atropos's arm. "You can't. I will not let you. I like this design. It's messy. It's real. It's theirs." "Atropos, wait," Lachesis yelled, joining her sister, standing between the ender and the spindle. "The variable, it's not chaos. It's evolution. The design, it is learning. We are learning. From them. Don't you see? That is the true design." Atropos looked at her two sisters, their faces masks of panic and defiance. She looked at their hands, holding her back. "It is corrupt," she said. "And my allotment is finality." With an immovable strength, she pushed them both aside. She placed the blades of her shears against the Nexus spindle, the heart of all life. The shears began to close. The sound was not loud. It was a deep, soft, tearing sound. It was the sound of a billion threads snapping. The sound was the only thing in the Nexus. A slow, grinding, tearing sound. Atropos, the inflexible, was closing her shears on the Nexus spindle. The heart of the loom. The source of all time. And the loom was coming undone. "You're erasing them!" Clotho, the spinner, screamed. She clawed at her sister's arm, but it was like pulling at a mountain. "You're not cleansing. You're undoing." The flickering in the real world had become a storm. In Chicago, Mark and Sarah's baby, the new creation thread, vanished from his crib. The violet thread of their love, the one that had survived so much, began to unspin. In Austin, Emily Hayes looked at her phone. Text from Jake Peterson dissolved before her eyes. She was alone again, the bottle of pills back in her hand, her jade green thread fading to black. Tapestry was unraveling. David's sacrifice. The mark's redemption. It was all being deleted. Atropos, stop. Lachesis, the allotment commanded, her voice of logic cracking with panic. You say the design is corrupt. You are right. My design was flawed. I failed. Atropos paused, the shears halfway closed. The spindle was cracked, bleeding light. Yes, she hissed. But this... Lachesis gestured wildly at the unraveling tapestry. This is not order. This is annihilation. This is your flaw. Atropos froze. It was the first logical argument that had ever given her pause. I am finality. I have no flaw. Your flaw is your inflexibility. Lachesis shouted. Your design has no room for growth. You see a virus, but I see an immune response. You see corruption, but I see evolution. Clotho, seeing the opening, joined her. They learned Atropos. Mark learned truth from his fear. David learned sacrifice from his failure. Emily is learning hope from her despair. We are learning. I learned my hope has consequences, she cried, thinking of the woman in Boston. And she, pointing to Lachesis, learned her logic is not enough. Clotho grabbed the front of her dark sister's robes. The tapestry is learning. That is the true design. Atropos looked at the shears embedded in the cracking spindle. The law is broken. Then the law must be rewritten, Lachesis said, stepping beside her. Not erased. Lachesis looked at her sisters, her mind the great allotment seeing the final allotment. Atropos, your duty is finality. But what if the design is no longer ours? What? Atropos and Clotho said in unison. We were the fates, Lachesis said, her voice filled with a new, terrifying, freeing idea. We measured. We spun. We cut. We were the program. But the mortal mark broke the program. The spinner Clotho broke the program. Thalidomie failed the program. She looked at Atropos, her eyes clear. The system is broken. You are right. So let them weave it. Give them the loom? Atropos whispered. It was an idea so alien it was sacrilege. Yes, Clotho breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. Lachesis, yes. We let go. Atropos, Lachesis commanded. Your cleansing is this cut our control. Atropos, the inflexible, the ender, the system itself, stared at the cracking spindle. She looked at the unraveling threads of humanity. She looked at her two sisters, one offering chaos, the other logic. She understood. The true corruption, the virus that had infected the loom, was them. She ripped the shears out of the Nexus spindle. The unraveling stopped. In Chicago, the baby reappeared in his crib. In Austin, the text message reappeared on Emily's phone. Atropos turned. She looked at Lachesis, design, and Clotho, creation. She held up the simple iron shears. No more fates, she said. And with a single final snip, she cut the ethereal golden threads that bound the three of them to the great loom of destiny. The backlash threw them back. And for the first time, the three sisters stood in the Nexus, not as gods, but as observers. Powerless. They watched the loom. It had stopped. For a breathless second, the universe held. And then it moved. Began to weave itself. They watched Mark's thread. His gray thread of fear flared as his child coughed. But his violet and white threads overwhelmed it. He chose to pick up the child, not to panic. They watched Emily's thread. She met Jake. It was clumsy. It was awkward. They had a fight. They reconciled. They were choosing to weave their threads together. They watched the Amanda thread in Boston, the one Clotho had broken. Her missed connection thread, it changed. Turned a new corner on its own and intersected with a new thread Lachesis had never measured. Tapestry was weaving itself. It was a mess. It was inefficient. It was chaotic. It was full of pain and joy and sacrifice and mistakes. Clotho, the spinner, was crying, but she was smiling. It's beautiful. Lachesis, the allotment, watched the chaotic, illogical, free patterns. It's inefficient, she murmured, her logical mind recoiling. But a small smile touched her lips. It is evolving. Atropos the Ender just watched. Her face was, as always, unreadable, but she put her shears away. "It is theirs," she said. The three sisters, their great, terrible, beautiful duty finally done, turned their backs on the loom. Hand in hand, they faded into the gray, infinite nexus, leaving the tapestry for the first time to the mortals who were spinning it. The loom wove on,